My brothers and sisters, today I speak to you not just as a leader, but as a witness to the truths that the world refuses to see. Today I speak about something so powerful, so sacred, and so misunderstood that it shakes the hearts of kings and emperors alike. I speak about Islam, and I speak about the principles that have guided me, guided our people, and guided countless generations who have walked this earth, seeking justice, seeking truth, seeking dignity. When I spoke about Islam, the world listened, but there were ears that trembled, ears that did not want to hear, ears that belong to those whose ambitions are fueled not by faith, but by the desire to dominate, to control, to bend the sacred into tools for their own power. Among them, a name rises: Mohammad Bin Salman. Yes, the crown prince, sitting in his palace, surrounded by wealth and influence, listening to words he never imagined he would hear from an African soldier, a man who speaks plainly, without fear, without hesitation. What I said is simple, yet profound. I reminded the world that Islam is not a weapon, and it never was meant to be. It is not a tool to bend people to your will, nor is it a mask to hide the ambitions of the powerful. It is not a mechanism to suppress voices, to silence dissent, or to justify oppression under the guise of piety. True Islam is not measured by the opulence of your palace, the strength of your armies, or the influence you hold over the weak. Is measured by how you act when no one is watching, by how you treat those who cannot fight back, by how you serve justice when the world expects compromise. Islam, true Islam, is a faith of justice, a faith that does not bow to corruption or intimidation. It is a faith that lifts the oppressed, protects the vulnerable, and challenges those who use their power to dominate instead of serve. It is a faith that calls on leaders to lead with honesty, to act with integrity, to place the welfare of the people above personal gain. It demands that those who claim to guide others have the courage to confront wrongdoing, even when it is convenient to look the other way.
Right from the start, this speech makes it clear. Islam is not a weapon for rulers to control the weak. It is a shield for justice, for dignity, and for compassion. This message is shaking palaces because it exposes the truth they want to hide.
Even when the world whispers that silence is safer than truth. Islam is also a faith of compassion. It teaches that our duty is not only to God, but to humanity, to our brothers and sisters, to the stranger, the orphan, the widow, and the destitute. Compassion is not merely a sentiment, it is action. It is the laws we uphold, the decisions we make, the mercy we extend, and the protection we provide to those who have no shield of their own. Compassion is the light that exposes hypocrisy, that pierces through the illusions of grandeur, that reminds even the most powerful that their wealth and status cannot substitute for empathy and moral courage. And Islam demands courage, not cowardice. Courage to speak when the mighty are wrong, courage to stand when the path is dangerous, courage to act when inaction would be easier. It demands that leaders resist the temptation to bend truth for convenience, resist the desire to manipulate religion for personal gain, resist the arrogance that whispers, "I am above accountability." True courage, the courage Islam teaches, is not performative. It is not the posturing of a ruler addressing his court. It is steadfast, it is resolute, it is willing to confront the uncomfortable truth, to challenge the powerful, and to risk personal safety for the sake of justice and righteousness. And when I said this, I did not whisper, I did not speak in riddles, nor did I wrap my words in ambiguity to protect myself from the wrath of the powerful. I declared it openly, publicly, and without apology. I declared it in front of those who believed they could manipulate faith for personal ambition. I declared it in a world where many had grown accustomed to leaders who used religion as a shield for oppression and a sword against the innocent. I declared it boldly because truth cannot be quieted, because justice cannot be deferred, because the people deserve a voice that speaks plainly and firmly, even when it shakes the foundations of power. And in that declaration, I reminded every listener that faith is not negotiable, integrity is not optional, and righteousness cannot be bought or silenced. Islam, in its essence, belongs to the people. It is the compass that guides actions, the standard by which leaders are measured, the moral force that cannot be hijacked by ambition, wealth, or fear. To deny this truth is to betray not only the people, but the very principles that faith demands. I spoke of the dignity of every human being, and I said that no throne, no crown, no oil riches can justify the oppression of our brothers and sisters in the name of religion. I said that the sacred teachings of Islam demand fairness, demand accountability, demand that the rulers themselves be judged not by their wealth, but by the integrity of their actions. And in those words, I could see the reaction ripple across continents. I could see the discomfort. I could see the fury. Mohammad Bin Salman, in his opulent halls, surrounded by gold, marble, and the trappings of unimaginable wealth, could not contain himself. The echoes of my words reached him across borders, across deserts, across seas, and they unsettled him in ways no wealth or security ever could. He could not accept that a young African leader, someone he likely viewed as peripheral, someone he assumed would bow to global power dynamics, someone he believed would remain silent in the face of injustice, dared to speak plainly, dared to confront the very misuse of religion he had relied upon to consolidate influence and control. He could not accept that the truth, spoken clearly and firmly, could strike deeper than the drums of his PR campaigns, deeper than the carefully choreographed displays of wealth, deeper than the armies that stand ready at his command. My words were not cloaked in diplomacy or flattery. They were unvarnished. They were direct. And in that clarity they carried a force that no palace, no throne, no entourage could shield him from. He could not comprehend that faith, when wielded with honesty and principle, resonates with the hearts of believers in a way that mere spectacle never can. The grandeur of his palaces, the weight of his armies, the influence of his advisors, none of these could compete with the simple power of truth. Because truth does not bend. Truth does not fear scrutiny. Truth does not need validation from wealth or titles. And when the people hear it, when the faithful recognize it, it becomes a force that even kings cannot suppress. He could feel the tremor of accountability that comes from being confronted by someone who refuses to be intimidated. The young African leader, he realized, was not a man to be swayed by fear or seduced by power. I spoke of justice, of integrity, of the responsibilities that faith demands from those in positions of authority. I reminded him, whether he liked it or not, that no crown sanctifies arrogance, no palace excuses oppression, and no army absolves the betrayal of conscience. The fury he felt was not merely personal, it was existential, for in those words lay a challenge he could not command, a principle he could not buy, a conviction he could not crush. In that moment, the opulence of his halls seemed hollow, the grandeur of his empire fragile, and the illusions of control that surrounded him as empty as the echo of my voice ringing across borders. And perhaps what troubled him most was the realization that my words had power where his wealth could not reach. Power over minds, over hearts, over the conscience of those who seek truth. For faith, when spoken of honestly, is stronger than armies. Integrity, when acted upon, is heavier than gold. Justice, when demanded courageously, cannot be contained by walls or guarded by soldiers. Mohammad Bin Salman, in his fury, had a choice: to listen, to reflect, to act with the integrity his faith demands, or to recoil, to ignore, to let his anger blind him. History, however, favors those who face truth, not those who attempt to suppress it. And in that moment, the young African leader,
When he declared that no crown sanctifies arrogance and no palace excuses oppression, the world paused. These words reminded everyone that real faith isn't about luxury or armies. It's about how you treat the powerless. That is why leaders who misuse Islam felt threatened.
unafraid, principled, unwavering, stood as a reminder that power without accountability is fragile and wealth without righteousness is empty. I told him, and I tell the world again, that Islam is not what is televised. Islam is not the luxurious displays of wealth or the political theater designed to impress outsiders. Islam is lived in the hearts of the people. Islam is justice in the courts, fairness in governance, compassion for the vulnerable, and courage to confront tyranny wherever it hides. And when I said this, I was speaking not as a critic from afar, but as someone who has walked among the people, seen their struggles, shared their burdens, and heard their prayers echo in the silence of despair. I reminded the world that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught that leadership is responsibility. Leadership is not luxury. Leadership is not self-interest. Leadership is service. And when I spoke of these principles, I was not choosing sides. I was not targeting a single individual. I was speaking truth to power, a power that thinks it can manipulate faith for control, a power that believes it can silence conscience with wealth and influence. I could see the reaction already. Advisors whispering, aides trembling, as the words reached the ears of those who were accustomed to obedience, who were accustomed to submission, who were accustomed to bending Islam to serve ambitions rather than people. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I stood firm, knowing that the truth has a way of traveling faster than any army, stronger than any decree, and more enduring than any crown. I said, Islam teaches us to speak against injustice, not to hide it. Islam teaches us to protect the weak, not to exploit them. Islam teaches us to be honest in our dealings, not to manipulate them. And when I said these things, I was not merely making a statement, I was issuing a challenge to those who have misrepresented the faith, a challenge to those who have corrupted it for wealth, a challenge to those who believe that their power makes them beyond accountability. Mohammad Bin Salman, I know you heard me. I know you felt that sharp edge of truth cutting through the illusions of comfort that surround you. I know your fury, because the truth does not bow. The truth does not fear palaces. The truth does not recognize oil wealth as a shield against conscience. And I spoke to you not to provoke, but because someone must. Someone must remind the world that faith is sacred, that religion is pure, and that no one, no matter how powerful, has the right to twist it for personal gain. I said that our brothers and sisters across the Middle East, across North Africa, across the world are watching. They are watching how leaders use religion as a cloak, as a shield, as a weapon. I said that the people are awakening, that they are seeing the hypocrisy, that they are yearning for leaders who embody the principles they preach. And in that moment, I could feel the weight of history pressing against my shoulders, reminding me that speaking truth is never without risk, but that remaining silent is the greater crime. I reminded him, and I remind all of you, that Islam calls for justice, even when it is inconvenient, even when it threatens the comfortable, even when it shakes the foundations of power. Islam calls for accountability, even when kings sit on golden thrones and believe themselves untouchable. Islam calls for courage, even when the world whispers that silence is safer. And these are not just words, these are actions, these are responsibilities. These are mandates that define the very essence of faith. I spoke of humility, the humility that leaders must possess, the humility that recognizes that wealth is fleeting, that power is temporary, that influence fades, but the righteousness of one's actions endures forever. I said that no kingdom, no palace, no army can substitute for integrity. I said that if you lead without justice, you lead into darkness, and no amount of oil, no amount of gold, no amount of spectacle can light that path again. I could see the reactions forming not just in palaces, but across the corridors of global power. There is discomfort when someone speaks plainly. There is alarm when someone speaks with conviction. There is fear when the people recognize that they no longer need to be silent, that the faith they cherish can no longer be used as a weapon against them. And this is the moment I live for, not for glory, not for recognition, but for the awakening of conscience. I spoke of responsibility, not the kind that is convenient, not the kind that is only performed for show, but the profound, unshakable responsibility owed not just to God, but to the people themselves. Leadership is not a title. Leadership is not a privilege. Leadership is a sacred trust. And with that trust comes accountability that cannot be evaded, cannot be hidden behind wealth, cannot be silenced by armies or guarded by palaces. I reminded the world that a leader's greatest sin is betrayal, not betrayal of an individual, but betrayal of everything that gives leadership its meaning, betrayal of the principles of faith, betrayal of the sacred trust of the people, betrayal of history itself. I said that Islam, the faith that guides millions, does not sanctify oppression. It does not whisper approval to those who crush the weak under the weight of ambition. It does not smile upon those who exploit, manipulate, or use religion as a shield for tyranny. Islam does not bless arrogance, nor does it elevate those who believe that crowns or wealth place them above conscience. True faith demands justice, humility, and compassion. And those who fail to embody these values, who use their authority for personal gain at the expense of the people, fail in the eyes of God, in the eyes of history, and in the eyes of every soul that looks for truth. And when I spoke these words, I felt the gravity of their weight. I felt the immense responsibility of reminding those in power that their actions are being watched, not just by their contemporaries, not just by the people who serve them or fear them, but by history itself. Crowns will fall, palaces will crumble, wealth will fade, armies will disband, but truth endures. Justice endures, integrity endures, and these principles, rooted in faith and morality, will stand long after the transient symbols of power are gone. I reminded the listeners that a leader's legacy is not measured by how much territory they control, how many resources they amass, or how intimidating their presence appears. It is measured by how they wield authority, by how they uphold the values of justice and righteousness, by how they protect the vulnerable and honor the trust placed in them. A leader who betrays these principles, even subtly, corrupts the very foundation of their power. Their influence may last years, decades even, but history will remember them for their failures, not their facades. I said that Islam demands courage, the courage to admit mistakes, the courage to act when confronted with wrongdoing, the courage to place the welfare of the people above personal ambition. And when I said this, I knew the weight of these words would resonate far beyond the walls of any.
The fury of Mohammed bin Salman shows how powerful truth really is. Wealth, palaces, and soldiers cannot protect against the voice of conscience. This moment proved that a young African leader could confront even the richest of rulers without fear.
Palace. I knew that there are rulers who believe themselves untouchable, who think their crowns make them immune to accountability, who mistake fear for respect. But the principles I spoke of cannot be silenced. They cannot be contained. They will echo through generations, shaping the conscience of those who seek justice and inspiring those who believe that true leadership is inseparable from integrity. I spoke not to shame, not to provoke for the sake of spectacle, but to remind those who have been entrusted with power that they are accountable. Accountable to God, accountable to history, accountable to the people. And in that accountability lies the essence of leadership. The recognition that authority is never a right but a responsibility, that privilege is never a shield but a duty, and that faith is never a cloak but a guide that illuminates the path of justice. As I spoke, I could feel the weight pressing on those who listened, the awareness settling into the hearts of those who have long used religion to justify arrogance, exploitation, and silence. For leadership without integrity is hollow, authority without justice is tyranny, wealth without humility is emptiness, and power without conscience is a burden that history will always remember, long after the fleeting symbols of dominance have vanished into dust. I reminded them that betrayal is not always loud. Sometimes it is subtle. A law ignored here, a promise broken there, a principle compromised for convenience. But even in its quietest form, betrayal is corrosive. It eats away at the legitimacy of power. It erodes trust. It stains the legacy of those who claim authority. Islam, in its purest form, calls on leaders to resist this temptation, to remain steadfast, to honor their responsibility with courage, wisdom, and humility. And so I spoke, not just as a critic, not just as an observer, but as a voice for the people, as a servant of justice, and as someone who knows that the weight of words, when spoken with conviction and truth, can ripple across time. Crowns will fall, palaces will crumble, and wealth will fade, but the principles of faith, the call to responsibility, and the demand for integrity will endure. These are the measures by which true leadership is judged. These are the truths that no king, no prince, no empire can ever erase. I said, and I will say again, that true leadership in Islam is courage. It is the courage to speak truth even when it angers the powerful. It is the courage to protect the oppressed even when it threatens your own comfort. It is the courage to stand firm even when the world whispers that compromise is safer. And in saying this, I was not seeking conflict, I was seeking clarity. I was seeking a reminder that faith is not a tool for dominance, but a compass for justice. I reminded Mohammad Bin Salman, and I remind the world, that wealth without responsibility is hollow. Power without integrity is empty. Authority without justice is tyranny. And the people, the faithful, the believers are watching. They are discerning, they are awakening. And no palace, no army, no oil fortune can silence their conscience when it speaks the language of truth. I said that the lessons of history are clear. Those who misuse faith for control are eventually confronted, not always by armies, not always by sanctions, but by the enduring power of truth, by the awakening of conscience, by the voices of the people who refuse to be silenced. And this is the legacy I embrace. Not the applause of kings, but the respect of history, the respect of the faithful, and the respect of God. I said that Islam is a light that guides humanity, not a weapon to strike fear. I said that the misrepresentation of faith for personal ambition is a betrayal of God's will. I said that no crown can sanctify oppression, no throne can bless exploitation, and no palace can hide arrogance from the eyes of the people or the judgment of history. I said, and I repeat, that the power of truth is greater than the power of wealth. The courage to speak is greater than the comfort of silence. The responsibility to act justly is greater than the allure of domination. And when I said these words, I was speaking not as a critic, but as a servant of conscience, as a believer in the principles that elevate humanity, as someone who refuses to bow to fear, to intimidation, or to false authority. Mohammed bin Salman's fury was evident, yes, but it is not my concern. My concern is the people, the faith, the truth. And I am reminded that the world often misunderstands the bold, often fears the honest, often resents the principled. But history favors those who speak the truth, those who stand firm, those who act with courage. And so I speak to the people across Africa, across the Middle East, across the world. Do not be silenced, do not be intimidated, do not mistake wealth and power for righteousness. Speak truth, demand justice, act with courage, and let faith guide your actions, not the ambitions of the few. And if kings and princes grow angry, let them. Their fury cannot diminish the power of righteousness. Their rage cannot erase the truth. Their wealth cannot buy integrity. I spoke of unity, the unity that faith demands, the unity that justice requires, the unity that rises when the people refuse to be divided by manipulation, by fear, by false promises. And I said that this unity, built on truth and guided by principles, is stronger than any army, brighter than any crown, and more enduring than any throne. I said that those who claim leadership without responsibility, who claim faith without integrity, who claim authority without justice, will face the consequences not only of history, but of conscience. And conscience, my friends, is relentless. Conscience never sleeps. Conscience cannot be silenced by gold or intimidated by power. I reminded the world that the message of Islam is clear. Justice, compassion, courage, and truth are not optional, they are mandatory. And anyone, no matter their title, no matter their wealth, who fails to uphold these values, fails not just the people, but God himself. I told Mohammad Bin Salman, and I tell the world, that true leadership is not measured by palaces or armies. It is measured by the hearts you touch, the justice you deliver, the truth you uphold, and the courage you demonstrate. And if speaking this truth angers the mighty, then so be it. History has always favored the brave, not the complacent, not the corrupt, not the comfortable. I said, and I will continue to say, that faith cannot be rented, cannot be borrowed, cannot be sold. Faith is not a commodity. Faith is not a shield. Faith is not a crown. Faith is a living, breathing guide for how we treat each other, how we govern, how we lead, and how we honor the sacred trust given to us by God. And as I spoke, I felt the weight of generations, the hopes of the oppressed, the prayers of the faithful, I felt the courage of those who have walked before me, who have dared to speak truth when silence was easier, who have stood firm when compromise was safer. And in that moment, I knew that words, spoken with conviction and guided by principle, are more powerful than wealth, more enduring than power, more unstoppable than fear. So to the Crown Prince, I say this once again. The fury you feel is the fury of truth confronting illusion. The anger you feel is the reaction of power meeting conscience. The discomfort you feel is the weight of justice you cannot escape. And I will continue to speak, to lead, to remind the world that faith is sacred, leadership is responsibility, and truth is unstoppable. To the people, I say, stand firm, speak boldly, lead with integrity. Let no throne, no crown, no palace, no army shake your conviction. Let no fury intimidate your conscience. And know that the principles of Islam, when lived fully and truly, are stronger than any ruler, mightier than any army, and eternal beyond any reign. This is what I said. This is why Mohammad Bin Salman was furious, and this is why the people listened, the faithful rejoiced, and the world witnessed a moment where courage met truth, where integrity confronted ambition, where faith was defended not in silence, but in the powerful voice of conscience.
Crowns may fall and palaces may crumble, but justice, truth, and integrity will endure forever. That is the real essence of Islam and the true measure of leadership. This is why the people listened, why the powerful grew angry, and why history will remember. Like and subscribe this channel.